Happy Tuesday, lovely people. We've got a very special treat for you today. We've got Rachael Layton with us, who is not only a fellow T&M coach, but she's also an Aussie from across the pond. So it's currently, well, not quite bedtime, but pretty much bedtime for her, and pretty much wake up time for me and Ellie. So, hey, Rachael, thanks for coming along.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sam and Ellie. It's so lovely to see you both, and it's so lovely to be able to connect like this. It doesn't matter if it's morning, afternoon, whatever. So it's great.
Yeah, it's
Ellie,
awesome. But thanks for the time check, Sam.
It's all good.
Thanks for the reminder of what time of day it is.
I felt
Got a whole
compelled.
day ahead.
I felt compelled to mention it. I don't know
Well,
why.
do you know what it is? The thing that is amazing in this sort of new world where we're spending lots of time on Zoom and have been for the last couple of years, like it's a wondrous thing to be able to connect with people in a way that we wouldn't ordinarily, and it never it never gets old, the fact that, like, I had a meeting this morning with Australia, and it's like, I was like, oh, what are you off surfing now? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh wow, cool. Yeah, like I'm struggling to string a sentence together because I've just woken up.
It's good.
It's awesome. So thank you for joining us, Rachael.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ellie. Yeah.
Right. So we were just saying, Rachael, there's so many, we know, so, you're a T&M coach. We know the work you do, and you've got loads of time to expand on that today. But we were talking about, your time in communications and corporate, but that also your journey with alcohol and journalism and all these things, all these really exciting things. So I don't know where makes sense to start, but wherever that place is, you go for it. We're really, we just want to hear about you and your story and what brings you here today.
Great. Okay. I guess my story is just typical. Every country I find, or not every country, but a lot of people say, oh, us Aussies, we're big drinkers. People from the UK will go, yeah, we're big drinkers over it. The Irish will say that, people from the States. And it's so funny because we all go, yes, it's our culture. We're big drinkers. But Australians are a bit known for being big drinkers. And drinking was just, I started when I was at high school, I guess. I don't remember my first drink. Lots of people do. I don't remember being a big boozer, but I did, drink then. And I guess when I left school, it just was a given. It wasn't, whether or not you would drink. It's just that you would, that was the thing. And for me, I grew up thinking it's just that the only reasons you wouldn't drink were if you had a cultural or religious background where you didn't drink, when you were pregnant, and if you had an alcohol problem, if you're an alcoholic and couldn't drink. So it just wasn't a question. So, and it wasn't an issue either. So I'd go out and you'd feel sick. And I remember lying on the bed I'd left school by then, and you'd have a big night out and you'd lie on the bed and go, I wish this room would just stop spinning, that type of thing. And you'd have a hangover and you'd have the greasy meal the next day, and then you'd just go back into it and get through it. So it wasn't an issue because that's how everybody drank, and that was going out and having a good time. And then I actually, so when I left school, I worked. I was studying as well. I went to uni, but I did it part-time because all I wanted to do was travel. And so I saved up and I went to your neck of the woods. So I went to the UK and I lived in London and did the Aussie, living in London thing. And because I was born in England, I could stay there for a bit longer. So I actually stayed for 4.5 years with my partner. And we did the backpacking thing. I went to the US and did some nannying there. We traveled and lived there, excuse me. And that, speaking of big drinking cultures, I lived in London, pub on every corner. You'd get knock off work, you'd go to a wine bar or the pub. We had our pub for work, that was our local pub. And that's just where you bonded. And I was new in a country, making new friends, and that was the way you bonded. So those sorts of early beginnings, I guess, with alcohol just embedded it in my head that, to socialize, and it's not even a conscious thing, to socialize, that's what you do. Everything you do to make friends, to go out, to even traveling, you have a drink or lots of drinks at the end of the day when you're backpacking. You find the local pub, or wherever and party on. So and it was fun then. As I said, you know, you'd wake up the next day hungover, but you never questioned it. And I would argue that I was probably a bigger drinker then than I was before I stopped drinking, to be honest. And I smoked as well. So in my early 20s, I was so unhealthy. I remember, you know, backpacking and walking up this hill and just being so out of breath because I was a smoker, I was a drinker. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in my early 20s and I feel like some, you know, 90-year-old. I was fit, I guess, but I was a healthy weight and everything, but very unhealthy lifestyle. But you can get away with it in your early 20s, I think. So anyway, I came back to Australia and did a complete 180 with my life. I was with my partner at that time, during that time, travelled. And we had children. So I've got 2 sons and I was in my mid-20s. So we decided to come back. We had built a house. We moved to the suburbs. We had 2 kids. I didn't drink because I was pregnant and then breastfeeding. And it just wasn't, it was before the mummy wine culture, as if the mummy wine culture, you know, started at a certain date or whatever. But I think nowadays, with social media, it's become more prevalent because it's marketed in that way. You know, it's 5 o'clock, it's wine o'clock type thing. You need a break, all that sort of stuff. That wasn't so. My oldest now is 28, so I had him in the mid 90s, and that certainly in my circle of friends, that wasn't a thing. So I just didn't. It wasn't that I didn't drink, I just didn't drink a lot. And because I had small children, I just didn't want to wake up the next day to 2 toddlers with a, you know, banging headache or whatever. So I went from this partying, traveling, living overseas lifestyle to coming back, settling down, living in the suburbs. It was quite a change. And I think that flip of the switch just totally changed the way I drank as well. I gave up smoking, obviously, too, when I was pregnant, and that stuck for me. So I just completely changed. And it was only, so when my children, fast track a little bit, my children were 6 and 4, and my partner and I separated after 13 years together. You know, we met when I was very young. I was 18 when we started going out, had to, you know, traveled, had 2 children together, all those things. And that because they were so young, it was such a, I mean, it's a difficult time, whatever age they are. But I remember we had a joint parenting arrangement, which means, you know, half and half basically. And I remember always thinking, you've got to put on, you know, the bright face, the happy face for your kids. You know, the kids can't suffer through this. They can't know that this is an upsetting thing. So I put on this facade almost for them. And then that became my facade for everyone else. But I have distinct memories of putting them in the car of their dad's for them to go away for a few days to be with him, and me just heartbroken inside. And walking back into the house, which it was a rental house, I'd moved away from him, you know, so all this, you know, upset and change and whatever, but it's all internal because you have to put on the happy face. You've got to say to the kids, and they were so upset. And I'm like, you're okay, you're okay. And I remember walking through the house, and this was just not one time, this was my pattern. And grabbing a bottle of wine and grabbing cigarettes, because I went back to smoking then because they were my 2 crutches, and sitting out the back and crying with this glass of wine that became 2, became 3, became 4, and smoking. And I think this is only figured out in hindsight because you do a lot of work, as you both know, when you stop drinking. But I think that was the start of me making that connection between this being the crutch, this being the solution, if you will. And as I say, this took a lot of unraveling. And even then, I didn't drink a lot, which sounds funny because I did to cope with that situation. But I was a single mum, and I was on. That's when I was working as a journalist, and journalists don't get paid a lot, so I wasn't paid well. I was living week to week, basically. I had these 2 kids. You just get on with it. It's one of those things where you just get on with it, which was, I always said, a blessing at the time. But it also means that any of that pain or dealing with it, you just pack it to the side. You put it in a little box, you tie it up, you know, drink to sort of numb all of that, and you just sideline that for another day. So and you get rewarded for that too, I think, by society. So people go, oh, you guys are handling it so well, you're doing so well, you've got such a good separation. You know, having the good separation is seen as a good thing. So you're like, okay, I just got to keep busy, I've got to do this, I've got to, you know, put food on the table. And when you're doing that, you're not processing what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, and this has taken work, and this is a lot of hindsight, but I think that's when that switch was turned on. So then, but as I said, you know, having 2 young kids, not having a lot of money, I couldn't, you know, I still couldn't drink at a level that I probably have wanted to, but I just couldn't. So it was kind of steady, although I was turning to it for different reasons than I was in my younger partying times. And as they got older, I met my new partner, who I have now. My kids became more independent. We started going out. Our social life was more around, you know, other couples and other people who were drinkers, not just couples, actually, just people around our age. But different things happened. Like, you know, I had a stressful job. I worked in corporate communications then. The stresses of having teenagers, that's just another life stage and another stress, you know. And so alcohol then became the fun, you know, letting off steam and having fun on the weekend and going out with people, but also the Friday night, even if you weren't going out, it's just like, oh, I'll have a drink. So to me, and again, going back to everything, it's this idea of taking the edge off. So alcohol had always been taking the edge off. So then when I still didn't think of it as an issue, because everybody drinks the same way. You know, that's the way everyone around, not everyone, but lots of people around me drank. And it wasn't seen as it was always, you know, you've got the government guidelines, and I don't know what they are there, but here it's, you know, 10 standard drinks in a week, and it's 4 in one go, as in one drinking session. And those standard drinks are very small. And, you know, the joke used to be, who drinks like that? You know, in terms of, there's a wide spectrum of people in your life who drink, and some people are, you know, don't drink at all, but they were very rare in my life. And even the people who rarely drank were people who actually didn't like the taste of it, but would drink just for the sake of being part of the group. So I've got a few friends who are like that, who will drink really sickly sweet things because they just feel that they don't want to be left out. Everybody else was on that other part of the spectrum that we've all been on. So it wasn't unusual. I didn't see it as being an issue until it kind of was, when I realised, and I think the 2 things that really, well, it wasn't actually COVID, but that was my second one. The first time I gave up, I started worrying, because I was worrying about the impact it was having on my health and my physical health. And I was such a fit and healthy person. Like, I got into running, I was doing half marathons, I was doing, you know, not at high level by any means, but I kept fit and I trained, and you know, I liked doing that. But so I had this real discipline with work and my home life and my, you know, exercise and all that sort of stuff. And drinking was kind of my, again, letting off that steam. It was like, you know, everything's so not rigid, but you're so disciplined in your life. You've got to have that valve, the release valve, and drinking was that. And I was like, well, how can I be so disciplined? And then when I drink, I just drink too much, and I started getting blackouts, and I didn't even know they were called blackouts at the time. I just would go, oh God, I can't remember that last part of the night. I can't remember getting home. I can't remember that cab ride home or whatever. I can't remember that conversation. That scared me. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never had this before, you know. And so I gave up about 6 years ago for 6 months, and it was surprisingly easy. I had read a lot of things, but the difference then was that it was a behavior change. So again, that discipline, it was like, I'm not drinking. It's for health reasons, which it was, but it was also because I was scared. It scared the shit out of me, basically, the way that I was drinking, because I was thinking, having blackouts, not being able to remember things, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning all the time, feeling, you know, I knew my energy levels weren't what they should be. I didn't drink every night, so I knew the nights that I didn't drink, I would be all right, and the weekends would be big drinking times. And so I knew, you know. And I was like, oh God, what do so I gave up for 6 months, but I didn't do the mindset work, and that was the key. That was the difference between this time and that time. So I did the whole, well, you know what, I wasn't that bad. This is ridiculous. Don't have a problem. Didn't hit rock bottom. Everybody, you know, all those things. And it's the fading effect bias. You guys know, you know what that's like. It's, God, I'm overreacting. And everybody around me was like, wow, that's drastic. I'm like, yeah, you know what, it is. So I was like, and also I've learned my lesson. You know, it was kind of like I'd given myself a punishment. You've learnt your lesson. Let's get back out there. And you can only, you know, have a couple of drinks and you'll be right. We went away for a week, and I was changing jobs and actually changing states because I had moved away for work, and I was moving back to my home city. And we took a week's break. By the end of that week, I was drinking exactly the same as I had before. And I was getting to the point, we were doing this beautiful road trip along the Great Ocean Road, which is a lovely part of Australia. It's just really beautiful. And we'd be doing all these drives and everything. And I'd be thinking again, oh, you know, I hope where we stop at lunch, I can have some wine. I hope, you know, we're driving back. I'm going, well, what time are we going to get home? Because I really, you know, have we got enough wine there? And I was like, oh my God, it's taking up my mental energy again, you know. And so then it took me another 4 years, I think, until I found this naked mind and went through the proper process of going, what am I making drinking mean, or what does drinking mean to me? And that flipping the thoughts and beliefs I had around it, particularly that idea around alcohol helps me de-stress, helps me relax, takes the edge off. They were my big things. And it had been, and again, as I say, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I've done all the work to figure it out, what made it different. And that working on those pieces was really key to changing the way I drink. And so it's been 18 months now, and it doesn't. So even those questions when people say to me, but oh, I didn't know you were that bad, or you know, isn't that drastic? You're like, no, because I feel so much better, and people see it. I say it's the wrong question to ask. Was it bad enough, or how much did you drink? Because a lot of people ask that question, how much did you drink, as if there is some magic number that if you're above that, then you should be giving up. And I try not to. I say to people, it really doesn't matter, because it's different for different people. It doesn't even matter if you drink every day. I didn't drink every night. You know, different people drink in different ways. The question isn't, have I hit rock bottom, or am I an alcoholic? The question is this serving me well? And the answer to that was no. And I knew that. I just had to do the work on, well, how do I live in the world that is so booze soaked and so, you know, so tied up with booze being an integral part of so many things. That was the mindset work I needed to do. And again, this naked mind was, you know, I know we talk like it is a cult, but it is kind of that, you know, it stripped away all of the stuff, and I saw it in that new light, and I was like, yeah, I'm drinking the lemonade there. So yeah, literally and figuratively, I guess. So yeah.
There's just such a big difference between the question, as you say, is this bad enough, to is this good enough?
Yes.
And when we can, like, I would have never believed, when I was in the thick of drinking, either in my 20s or my 30s, you know, so in my 20s it was all about fun and letting loose, and in my parenting years it was like you, for stress release, it was like a ripcord for the parachute to escape off out into you know, relaxation and being away from the monotony and the you know, just the difficulty of life when you're in the thick of it all. I would have never ever believed that a life without alcohol was a better one. It's like, well, you know, you only stop if it gets like really, really, really bad, and then poo are you, because, well, you know, you've got nothing to look forward to then, have you?
I know.
And this
life.
is all, yeah, it's all predicated off the back of every time I tried to, you know, drink within the guidelines, or I need to have a few days off, I was absolutely bloody miserable. Yeah. But I just didn't understand. I didn't have the knowledge of what was going on in terms of how alcohol worked with the brain and body. And so the opening for me with this Naked Mind, the insight came from looking at this thing in a very, very different way, understanding how it worked, and being able to, in an instant, change that belief because of new information. And then that feels really different. So then I had a whole bunch of questions around, well, how do you live alcohol free? How do you socialize? But it wasn't full of fear. It was more excitement and potential and possibility. And then the further that you edge down that road, you then start to realize, like, it's a complete life upgrade. Who knew? It's like the best kept bloody secret. And so that question, going right back to it's not like, for anybody listening to this, don't ask yourself, like, is it bad enough? It's like, is it good enough?
And I think that's part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now. So giving up, and I don't like to use the word giving up, I like to talk about it as choosing. And that goes back to, are you asking the right question? Is it good enough? So it's choosing an alcohol-free lifestyle. And I think even language is part of, you know, my what I love anyway, but part of my career. But I think language is so important. And so I didn't feel the second time around like I was giving up. I was choosing this lifestyle. And you're choosing to up level, aren't you? And it's and that's so important. But the part of the reason that I wanted to do this, go into coaching, was because I wanted to change that conversation, because I was just so, it really felt to me like a punishment. And I kept saying to myself, if you can't moderate, because I spent years trying to moderate, that was the holy grail for me, moderation. I've heard you talk about this before, Ellie, too. It wasn't until I realized why moderation was so difficult for me, because I was like, and that's why I go back to the running thing, you know, I could be so disciplined. I could follow a plan, to, you know, because if you run at distance, or if you do any sort of training, you follow a plan and you get to, you know, your goal. And so I've always been that sort of goal-driven person. Yet with drinking, it just didn't work the same way. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so weak-willed? And you do. So you internalize it, you give yourself all these names about you're weak-willed, you can't do it, you can't handle this, you know, other people can do this, what's wrong with you? And then realizing, this is why moderation is difficult. It's nothing to do with you being weak-willed, or it's what alcohol does, and it does it to everybody. So that was a real, it's kind of a, I don't know. I talk about it in terms of, you know, the Wizard of Oz, and you're pulling back that curtain and going, oh, it's just this little old man on, you know, panel or whatever. It's kind of like, oh, that was all bullshit that I was saying to myself. It's all a lie, or not a lie. It's just what I believed. And
Yeah.
so I kept talking to myself like a child. If you don't behave, you're going to have to give this up. I'm going to have to, it was almost like I'm going to have to take this treat from you. And then when the treat was taken away, when I decided to take the treat away, by then I had read This Naked Mind, which was the reason I gave up the second time around. I didn't see it as taking away a treat. I saw it as, this is what I'm trying to do for my life and my well-being. And it is it's a choice. It's a healthy choice. And it was so empowering. I still had to get through all that social stuff, worried about what people were saying. So I wasn't worried about giving or stopping drinking. I was more worried about, how do I live in this world with that and the societal pressures on it. And I was in my early 50s. I'm saying, I'm 53 now. I've got to stop saying gave up, because I just kept saying, I don't say give up, but I'm said about 3 or 4 times now. I'm thinking, for God's sake, I'm, in my early 50s, who cares, but it was,
there's a process of relearning for sure. Like, it's like almost like going back to the beginning again, starting again and learning how to be an adult, a fully functioning adult in a different way. But that the empowerment and the liberation, it gives you the faith and the confidence to go on. So I distinctly remember that feeling of when I thought the thought, I don't have to do this anymore. Like, I get to not drink, instead of, like the mindset of deprivation. It's so different.
Absolutely. That freedom. Yeah.
So true. All I kept, like, all the way through your story, Rachael, I kept hearing, it's really interesting to me that when we first try and stop drinking or choose differently or whatever, we can only deal with what we can see. And what we can see is the behavior in front of our eyes. We can see that. We can see posters that say moderate. We can see this is your weekly allowance. We can see all these numbers and statistics and this behavior. And it's like the pointy tip of the iceberg. And we can see our thoughts around it. So we start doing what we know, which is we try and solve it at the same level. So we have this thought around drinking and we tell ourselves off, like you said, and we, like, almost like we sort of getting more and more annoyed at ourselves, and then we don't. So we beat ourselves up about it. And it's not until you actually realize that you've been looking in the wrong place, that upstream of the behavior is a whole load of stuff that is not as scary. Well, for one, some of it, we don't know it's there, or we're scared to look there. But the moment we do, the moment we find a different platform perspective, which might be This Naked Mind, or it might be meeting a coach, it might be reading a book, we get outside ourselves, we get out of our own internal biases for just long enough to be able to see that this isn't about what I can see. This is about what I can't see. Like, the world just starts to kind of magically change in front of our eyes. And these things you said, I love it, because I've said these things before about my journey. Like, the amount we were drinking when I was traveling your neck of the woods. It's funny because I landed in Sydney when I was like 23 and had 2 years out your way. Same thing. I was drinking like a crazy person, but it didn't occur to me because everyone was doing it. And I don't know, it just, at that point, there wasn't this, oh, you're drinking too much. It was just, and then looping back round, I think it's really important we talk openly about, because how bad does it get? That metric of by what you can see, that's a bullshit metric. It's about how you feel. It's the energy inside, because it doesn't matter whether someone's drinking 15 pints or 1. If they're feel trapped and it's not good enough, and they know that life could be better, that's the metric. It's almost like an invisible scale that we need to be tuning into, not what we can see. I just loved you sharing all that. I thought it was really powerful.
And I think sometimes we're so outwardly focused in terms of, what is the measure? What's the rock bottom that I have to suffer before I do this? Or what's the, arbitrary number of drinks? I mean, you've got the government guidelines, but everyone, goes, well, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
It is a thing, obviously, but that's not, you know, feasible. So what is the thing? And so you compare yourself against everybody else. Usually if you drink a bit, you're hanging around people who drink a bit, so everybody's the same, so well, that's okay. And so it's all these external measures. But you're right, Sam, it's like I'm the one waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm the one, and one of the reasons that was a trigger was perimenopause, and sort of you get all the hormonal stuff going on. So my body was out of whack anyway. I was like, oh gosh, you know, I'm dealing with this, but and I realized, you know, hot flushes and all those sorts of things were just being exacerbated by alcohol. And again, if I had flipped it and gone, why exactly am I doing this, you know, and asking that question, like, is this really? And I talk about it now when I'm coaching, and I'm like, you know, if you were eating broccoli, and broccoli, you really, I actually equate it to mangoes because I love mangoes. If you were eating something you really loved, but it was making you wake at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was making your hot flushes worse, it was making you feel sick the next day, like, you know, sick in the tummy, and that you're going to work and you're just feeling this low level energy, you're feeling just drab all the time, and you knew that it was because of the mangoes, because on the days that you didn't have the mangoes, you'd be fine, you know what I mean? And you'd be like, well, I'm not going to I like them, but you know what I mean? I'm just going to have plums or something, you know, which is kind of the thing I did. I went to alcohol-free drinks and chose other drinks. It's like, and it sounds ridiculous when you say it that way. And people do it all the time, you know, when they realize they have a lactose intolerance, or, you know, they need to go gluten-free or whatever, they realize they feel better, and it's not an issue. Nobody bats an eyelid about that sort of thing. And it's like, I choose to do this, and sometimes it's not a choice, it is actually medically you have to do it. But you know, if you do it because it's a choice, because that sort of food doesn't sit well with you, and yet we have such a resistance to do that with alcohol and say, you know what, it's not serving me in any shape, way or form, you know, physically or mentally, because that's the other thing, you know, it starts to affect your moods. And you know, I don't, thank God, have anxiety or depression, but definitely there were times I'd be waking in the middle of the night and getting anxious thoughts and feeling down the next day. And so that could easily, you know, you could easily get into a state where that's not affecting your mood level. And again, perimenopause, your mood levels are all over the shop with hormones. So yeah, so it's a mental health and a physical health, I think.
It sure is. And the thing that's keeping people stuck is the misunderstandings around, you know, you mentioned the societal beliefs, and the deeper beliefs that the level of self of, like, well, as a single mum, I can't cope without this. This is the thing that's, you know, holding it all together. But the thing that is so important as, you know, we approach our late 30s and 40s is, as you say, it's perimenopause. Like I knew absolutely shit all about it. And
totally.
you know, I'm right in the middle of this this discovery of so I have like the early ovarian insufficiency or whatever, so I'm effectively going through it all like as a, you know, early, but you know,
That's not a lucky thing to get early on, is it? You know, that's
no, but you know, the thing that I see so much in my coaching practice and in coaching groups of women is that those symptoms that you mentioned, like all of the, and they're so varied. In perimenopause, there's so many things that you would never ever think are related, but there are, and people kind of kidding themselves around like what's going on. The only way that you're ever going to get to a baseline so that you can try to understand your symptoms and treat them is by removing alcohol, because as you rightly say, it exacerbates all of the symptoms. People don't necessarily put it down to, you know, put it in its rightful place. And you know, I wouldn't have had it if I was still drinking now. Like, I dread to think I wouldn't have had a hope in hell's chance of working out what was going on. And even removing alcohol, it's taken over 2 years to get, like, I'm almost at the point where my treatment is in place so that I can just, you know, function like I don't like using the word normal, but function like a human being.
Yeah.
Because the lack of hormones, and particularly estrogen, it has such a huge effect on so many things, and on the way that you feel, and the mood stability thing, or instability. It's a huge thing. And people, and a bit like with drinking, people suffer in isolation. Oh, this is just me. You know, I'm just, you know, like rage is a big thing. And there's so much shame attached to it. Be like, oh, you know, I should be in control. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And it's entirely bloody normal and understandable because of what's going on. But we haven't got a hope in hell's chance of understanding it if you're throwing, you know, gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
So it's
exactly.
it's such an important thing, I think, just particularly at this sort of an age. And the earlier that you can get clear about your symptoms, the sooner you're going to feel better. Like, you know, Sam unfortunately has had to be along for much of my hormonal ride, and so he's learning all about this.
I've learned a lot.
Oh, that's good.
and
You can write
being
the
on,
book now.
yeah, and being on the end of, you know, me in some states and tears, and it's you know, it doesn't need to be that way. Yes. But you have to find your baseline. Like, you can't start treating yourself until you know what you're working with, and you can't know what you're working with until you've got all of the other shit out of the way.
Yeah. And people don't make the connection even. So I've got friends who aren't worried about their drinking, but when I've talked about it in terms of perimenopause and, you know, the hot flush, so I don't actually get, and it's hard, you know, I don't have a medical background, so I'm not going to pretend that the two are related. I've done enough research to know that things like hot flushes and alcohol, or alcohol exacerbates your hot flushes, because you're trying to regulate your body temperature, and alcohol, processing alcohol, heats up your body. So, you know, you bring those two together, and of course it's not going to help your hot flushes. So I've talked to friends who don't necessarily worry about their alcohol, but have taken a break to see if that will help their menopause symptoms. And they're like, oh my gosh, it really has helped. It's not the magic cure. It's not the silver bullet. It's not going to make everything go away. Although I don't have hot flushes anymore. I have other symptoms, but all the other symptoms have really lessened quite considerably, and I just don't get hot flushes. I'm madly touching wood because the universe is going to send me hot flushes tomorrow or something, and go, no. But, you know, just, and that's just, you know, the evidence base with myself and, you know, other friends who are going and come back and go, oh my gosh, I didn't even connect the two, you know, that didn't have an issue with alcohol, but we're like, oh my gosh, this is so much better without it. And so they haven't necessarily given up, but they've cut back because of it. So, but you're right, you know, we don't talk about these things because there's other bigger players at play who I'm not getting into conspiracy theories or anything, but there's a lot of money behind alcohol and marketing alcohol, and, you know, taxes go to the government and whatever. So we hear about all the health issues with it. We hear that all the time, but we choose to ignore it. And we are given so many powerful messages talking about how great it is. So that's hard to fight against that almost.
We still live in a world where it's advertised. It's wacky. If you actually step out the box and think about it for a minute, it's madness. And there will come a time where it will be very, very apparent to us how crazy it is. Yeah. Like in the way that it's mad to me that when I first started uni, you could sit in a room and smoke inside. I'm like, what the fuck? That's mad. And the time will come where we'll see this in the same light. I have no doubt.
I agree. And it's when you choose not to drink, that you see it, you see that it's everywhere. You go to buy a birthday card for somebody, unless they're 6 years
Oh, yeah.
old,
Yeah.
it's, you know, a beer tankard or, you know, champagne glasses. You know, even when I say happy birthday to people, it's the champagne emojis. I don't do that anymore, but, you know, everybody's doing the champagne clink glasses. It's let's catch up for a drink after work. And a drink doesn't have to be an alcoholic drink, of course, but, you know, it's you see movies and TV, and you know, it's just such a just there. It's insidious. Yeah.
That's the thing with the, you know, the whole, like, you know, you say about conspiracy theories, and this is the issue with it. It's not that there's like one person, like five evil people in a room plotting and planning. It's more that the thing itself has become like it's like its own organism now that grows, and it's feeding on itself because companies require, you know, profit. So the alcohol companies they don't see people, they see statistics. They're always needing a new market to go into. And so these things, they just start to grow. And then, you know, you've got lobbyists working in there. Like, it's crazy. The biggest cannabis lobby is the alcohol lobby, because they're worried about the market share they're going to rip from them. So everything's at war with each other. So it's not, so like, if you look at it from the bigger picture, it's everywhere. So the only way that you're really going to see it is to educate yourself, is to get to the truth and hold on to it.
And we do the marketing for them too.
Yeah.
You know, I go back on my Facebook scroll and you get Facebook memories, and there'll be, you know, a photo of me on holidays with a cocktail glass there, relaxing, you know, Friday night, big glass of red or big glass of white or whatever. And going back to that idea of mummy culture, that wasn't my experience when my kids were young. It was more when they were teenagers that my drinking ramped up a bit. But I would, you know, bet $1 million that if I was around, if had my kids in this day and age with social media and the mummy culture sort of idea, because we're spreading that message to us, to each other, you know. So yes, we've got, you know, the big bucks of big alcohol, but it's also amongst ourselves. We're saying this is how, you know, you unwind. And back to Facebook again, had a, you know, huge week, blah blah blah, all the comments, you know, you deserve a wine, love, you know, have a cold one, you know, all those sorts of things. And we just, I've done it. You don't think it's not a bad thing. That's just the way you take the edge off.
Yeah. And the most offensive thing we can do to big alcohol is to share a story of choosing to not drink, for example, where there wasn't a Hollywood rock bottom, or where we were drinking within their guidelines, or we were, because it offends them, because they're like, no, now you don't fit in the us and them box. Now you don't fit in these labels. And I would encourage people, when the time is right, you know, it's hard. I think very often I noticed early in my journey, I would actually change things to fit people's model of what was going on because it was easier. These days, I just tell the truth. And if it offends someone, that's not my shit. All I do is tell them what happened. And that's up to them. I deliver my truth. They receive it in the way that they do. And, you know, when we're strong enough to do that, there's so much damn power in that, because, you know, people need to hear this stuff, because exactly like you say on your website and everything, Rachel, like you don't have to hit a rock bottom. You know, you don't have to be in the throes of all that stuff. It doesn't have to look like that.
And I think the more that stories like that get out there, because we need all the stories, we need people's different, you know, people struggle with alcohol in different ways, and we need to hear all of the stories. But I don't know if this is an Oprah quote, but I'm going to say it is something that Oprah would say: you can't be what you can't see. So to me, it was just, you know, if you were an alcoholic, basically, and I know there's no such thing as an alcoholic, we talk about alcohol use disorder now, but that's the, you know, in layman's terms, it's what we think of it. And so you've got this, we each have our own perception of what that looks like. That certainly wasn't what I was. So that wasn't a choice then, you know. And until I started hearing other people's stories, and that was so helpful for me. So reading Annie's book, you know, This Naked Mind, at the beginning was that mindset shift, but also seeing other people having these fantastic lives and saying exactly what you two are saying, is holy crap, life is better without it. There is more to life. There is much more. I get more done. Get more joy. My relationships are deeper and stronger, and all these things. And if people hear that message from people who look like they did in terms of their drinking, they go, oh my gosh, this is an option. It wasn't even an option for me, and to think that that's, you feel almost hoodwinked that you didn't even consider that was an option.
And it's and what an option it is. So just to hook it back into the perimenopausal stuff, you don't have to look too far when you're educating yourself on that to find out, what are the things that are going to help me improve my situation, my symptoms, my health through this transition, because you're going through it one way or another. Books, there's a wonderful lady in the UK called Dr. Louise Newson. She's got a wonderful following and lots of resources. You don't have to go too far and you'll stumble upon reducing your alcohol intake. But of course, the difficulty is that it's like, that's the inconvenient truth. And nobody wants to reduce their alcohol intake because they don't believe that life's going to be better without it. It's, it just feels too uncomfortable. So the kind of work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing and all of the other women that are around about, this age or have some experience of the transition, it's so important because it is totally changing the narrative. So when somebody reads, oh shit, I need to reduce my alcohol intake, it's not oh God, this is, something awful that's being put upon me or something unfeasible. It's like, wow, this is an opening to a new way of living.
It's not a fate worse than death. It is actually something that you're going to actually reap all these other rewards. And I think when people see that, in terms of benefits rather than that punishment idea, I think more people would come on board because they're like, oh, okay, you can do that and you can enjoy life and you can, so the discussion is so important.
And in every realm, right? So whether you're talking about, whether you're in corporate, like you're actually going to get an edge, like you're going to actually have an edge against a lot of other people. Like it's not a disadvantage done like with the right way of looking at it. It's a massive advantage, right? And, with anxiety, with any kind of depression, with any kind of, in sport, for example, sport culture, you go and get battered after, like you want to be really, really good at sport. Like this is going to increase. So this lesson it morphs into every realm. And it's a wonderful thing to know, exactly like you two have just so beautifully said, that this isn't just like a choice. This is an amazing choice, which is way better than the choice that you haven't really been making, the one that's been forced on you, it's been pushed on you for the longest time.
Really eye-opener.
Hey, Rachael, look, amazing. Really, really lovely to hear that. And I'm so happy that you, and I'm sure I can speak for Ellie as well, we're both so happy that you found the place that you're in and you're now using this as a superpower to help set people free. So tell us a bit about where people can find you, the website, your coaching, give us all that cool stuff.
Cool. So my business is Inspired to Change. And so the website is inspiredtochange.com.au. I'm based in Australia. And I'm on Instagram as well. So Inspired to Change AUS, and the underscores between the words. But also, so I mainly do one-on-one coaching. I love the one-on-one coaching and really delving into people's beliefs and having those conversations and having a safe place for people to land, because often this piece around sharing your story, and there's often shame around that and people feel that they're the only one going through it. And so being that safe place to land and to discuss it, but also to get the strategies and tactics to learn how to go forward in life. I love doing that. But I've also in the process of completing an online modular course that people
Cool.
can do that is they can get some coaching with that, but do a self-paced course. And also, I'm following in your footsteps, both of you, in the live alcohol experiment. So I'm coaching in the May live alcohol.
I meant to congratulate you at the very beginning. I had that because I saw that and I was like, well, that's so cool. You're going to have so much fun in there.
God,
That's
I love
epic.
it. Mm.
Yes, I've been in that group as a mentor for quite a few of the times, and it's such a great supportive group. The coaches are always brilliant. You guys have been amazing. The mentors in there are great, but the other participants as well. So it's just such a lovely group of people, and I think I've completed 4 as a mentor, and
Cool.
it's just a brilliant space to be in. And you can see people come in a bit hesitant to share, and then they know that it is that safe space. And even though it's online, that community is so important. I think I've found community so important in my, I won't say journey, in the way that I've gone through this. And so I'm so glad that there's stuff like that out there for people, because I think it's so important.
It's a life-changing program, as somebody that's been through it as a participant, as well as coached in it a number of times now, and it's a really fun thing to do. So congratulations on that. Enjoy that. And we'll make sure to drop a link so that people can join the May live alcohol experiment and see Rachael in there doing her coaching. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you to you both. It's been great. Yeah. And congratulations on the podcast too. I love it. I listen to it every week, and you have some awesome chats and some awesome guests. So yeah, it's great.
Oh, thanks, pal. That means a lot to hear that. Thanks so much.
You're doing a lot of good in the world.
Cool. Right. I'm going to hit that button.